Hey, Tony.
What's going on?
Hey, first question, have you been told anything yet about your status?
No, just under consideration, and Mike can probably talk about it more later. I do feel strong that I'm in good standing here, you know, in one form or another. You know, that being said, I also, you know, understand the business and know how things kind of go and understand that, you know, might have to wear a different uniform next year. So hopeful to wear the Orioles one. If that doesn't work out, then obviously we'll kind of have to look around and go from there.
You had said yesterday that you thought it was very likely that in a couple of days you'd have to start looking for work. Are you going to go pursue other openings with other clubs right now, or are you going to wait on the Orioles?
I would love to be here. This is a great place. It's a historic franchise. It is a place that gave me my first full-time big league job, so ideally I get to stay here in a lot of ways. I'm very comfortable with the people here. I have a lot of respect for the people here. Maybe most importantly, I love a lot of these young players, guys that have been here and grown with myself and also kind of helped raise in a lot of ways here over the last 5 years. So ideally, yeah, you get to stay, but also, you know, up close and personal view of this business, growing up in it, understanding that, you know, coaches might have the least job security in this business in a lot of ways, rightfully so or not, and most likely not. You do have to kind of hedge and make sure that you're going to be able to pay your bills and take care of your wife and kids and do the whole deal that is necessary as being a normal human being and not just a coach.
Tony, as much as you want to stay, if it's not in the managerial role, would you still have interest in staying with the organization? And as a follow-up to your last answer, just what has this meant for you in your professional development, for your family, to have this opportunity this year?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part. Just professional development, massive, you know, in a lot of ways. You just managed a major league team for 4.5 months under some of the most trying circumstances you can probably have in this position. You know, I think probably, I was just joking, I think you probably go back 21 days, I've probably had to answer whether I'm going to have a job or not here consecutively. That's not easy to do, and I don't think that's normal in a lot of ways, but also kind of part of the situation that we're in here, and it's fine, it's part of it. So have grown immensely in a lot of ways, you know, obviously running a game, a big piece, and kind of learning how to do that here at the major league level, and then just, you know, being a leader of a national brand essentially on a daily basis, and, you know, having to sit up here and answer tough questions and be honest and tell the truth and, you know, support the organization, you know, to the best of my ability. As the first part of the question, yeah, I'd consider anything. Again, there's a lot of loyalty and there's a lot of love from me to this organization. They pulled me out of the minor leagues essentially. I was an interim third base coach in Cleveland in 2020 and was likely going back to be the infield coordinator in 21. You know, and they gave me a shot. So I'm a loyal person. I love this place in a lot of ways. I'm very thankful to it. I'm open to all options, but obviously understand that it's not just about me. There's a family at home, and you know, this is a business.
Tony, you mentioned a couple times over the last week the need to get the young core, the hitters, back on track. What can tangibly change to improve the fortunes? Really, for the last year and a half, this offense has not looked the way that many expected it to look.
Well, I think we have to start and recognize that expectations for that group have been astronomical in a lot of ways. And in some ways, they set the expectations because a lot of them came out of the gates right away, and they came out really well. I think there are some guys here that have struggled in some ways that weren't part of that initial group that set the bar so high. And I do think it made it unrealistic for some of these guys to kind of follow. You know, I talked to Sammy Basayo yesterday, and I told Sammy to go look at Aaron Judge's first 100 bats in the big leagues. And you know whose numbers it matches? Sammy Basayo's. You know, so I think there's a precedent for young players to have kind of tough stretches in the beginning of the parts of their career. Now, to answer your question, what needs to tangibly change? Well, we need to get these guys back to kind of what they were. Some of these guys that did set the bar high for themselves, and how we do that, for me, I think it's just it's getting together, it's being honest, it's getting all the players in terms of staff, analysts, everybody that has a voice. It's getting, it's soliciting outside opinions. It's doing a lot of different things to try to figure out how we get these guys back on track. And I do have a ton of faith in this organization and their capacity to do just that.
Tony, much has been made the last couple of weeks about the core, the offensive core. You've seen and observed the organization now for a while. Pitching-wise, pitching development at the lower levels, do you think it needs some assistance, some changes, so that we start to develop a pipeline of pitchers?
Sure, that's a fair question. I think they're doing that. I think it's been done. You know, I think probably, and you can talk to Mike about this, I think, you know, initially they came in and, you know, it's kind of getting the offensive side up to par, and I think they have done that in spite of some of the recent performance. I do think that they have the right pieces and right players here. Talking to one of the recent hires here, Danny Haas, who was in New York with us, I asked him point blank, you know, what do we have in terms of pitching down below? Because he's obviously with Washington, taking stock of our organization, then now with us. And he was very matter of fact that it's going to be really good, what's coming right now. So I think that they have changed the infrastructure on the pitching development. I don't think that you push a button and they all just show up the very next year. I think it takes a couple years, and I think you're going to see some of these pitchers here show up in the coming years and hopefully next year.
Tony, it's been said that in 2022, I think Chirinos and Odor got a lot of credit. Your coaching staff would say they taught those guys how to win. They have won now, and then the step back. So does the clubhouse need another leader like that, or is that leadership already here?
You know, we love veteran players and we love great leaders. It's hard to predict what's going to be here and what isn't. What we can predict is that Gunnar and Westberg and Bradish and likely Dean and all these guys, Adley, they're going to be here next year. And those guys all have the makings to be great leaders, and those guys have all won here in the big leagues. So do we invite more veteran players and more veteran leadership? Without a doubt. Do we think we also have some growing leaders and guys that can kind of take that part or that necessity and move it forward for us? Absolutely.
Tony, as you were managing with the interim tag, I mean, were you thinking about the future and the uncertainty at all? Were you able to successfully kind of block that out and just focus on winning and the player development side of things here?
Sure. I mean, you guys ask me every day if I was, you know, going to be employed next year. So yeah, I was thinking about it, and that's okay. That's kind of part of it. You know, managing under the interim tag will be the hardest thing I do in my career in a lot of ways. You know, in a sense, it is your team, you know, especially after the trade deadline and, you know, kind of all the guys that came in. It did start to feel like my team at that point. Up until the trade deadline with the players that were here under, you know, the previous leader, you know, it didn't in a lot of ways. And I think that's fair, and I think people can understand that. It's a challenge. There's things that you're going to do under the interim tag. You're going to come in and make some changes, turn the dials. And there's things that you have to leave alone just because, you know, if you turn all the dials that you want to turn, it's going to upset the room and it's going to change the culture in a lot of ways, and maybe in some ways that you don't want. So huge challenge in a lot of ways. Thankful I got to do it. Would do it again in a heartbeat, especially here, and especially with the support that, you know, Mike and his crew and his lieutenants gave me throughout.
Tony, you know, kind of speaking to that, it feels like there's been a shift in you. You kind of take the job under obviously tough circumstances. You were not campaigning for the full-time job at that time. You know, was it that trade deadline that made you shift confidence in your own abilities to be the full-time manager, or was there a moment during the season where you kind of felt, okay, this is, I could be in this job full-time?
I got a lot of confidence in myself, Kyle. I in terms of being a full-time manager, yeah, I think I can do it anywhere. I think I can do it in a big market. I think I can do it in a small market, a rebuilding team, a win-now team. So at no point, even the day that Mike kind of handed the reins to me, at no point did I feel overwhelmed or incapable of executing this job. And I think over the last 4.5 months, I basically did a local and national interview on a daily basis that was incredibly invasive. And I do feel strong that I passed with flying colors in a lot of ways.
Tony, speaking of that, do you feel like you'll have to go through another interview process, and have you been given a timetable on when they may reach a decision?
Mike will give you a timetable. That's not for me to say if he chooses. In terms of interview, I'll do whatever they want me to do. Again, you know, I've been given advice by people around the league, uniformed staff members that have managed in the big leagues. I've had some guys tell me if they offer to interview, take it, and I've had some guys that have says that if they ask you to interview, don't do it because you've interviewed for the last 4.5 months. I tend to make up my own mind and try to do the right thing based on the people around me and how people treat you. This place has treated me incredibly good, and I'll be forever thankful whichever kind of path I go down in the future. So if they want me to come in and interview and they feel like I'm worthy of it, then I'll do whatever they want.
Tony, you mentioned rising.
Hey, Danielle.
You mentioned the rising leaders. This would have been the year, especially the second half, if they were going to step up to kind of take that step and take control of this clubhouse. Did you see those guys start to do that? And also, the one name that you didn't mention was Tyler O'Neill.
Sure.
Do you see him as a leader of this clubhouse moving forward?
Yeah, I'll start with the names that I said. Yeah, I do. There's a lot of examples of things that they were doing behind the scenes. You guys, unfortunately, don't get to see how wonderful these guys are and the unselfish things that they do for each other, and especially in spite of a losing record and a losing season. I do feel like in a lot of ways, once the trade deadline hit and some of the bigger personalities were moved to different places, I feel like that core group of players started to kind of separate themselves and take the reins, so to speak. In terms of Tyler, Tyler's got all the traits to do it. And I'm very fond of Tyler, and I think he's unfortunately misunderstood because he wasn't here enough, because he was hurt. But I think Tyler is a huge piece to this thing in a lot of ways. Obviously, both on the field with his immense potential and what he's done here previously in his career, and then also you know, just his natural way of kind of going about things. I'll share a quick story. One of the young hitters was kind of frustrated in New York. I walked down in the tunnel to, I guess, encourage might be one way to say it. Maybe that might not be the best way. But Tyler kind of beat me to the punch and picked the kid up, you know, just kind of reminded him that he's going to be all right. And those types of moments when you see Tyler do that gives you a good feeling and makes you feel like, yes, he's going to be able to do that for us here as soon as he can keep himself on the field.
Tony, players have talked about how open you are in communication with them. What do you feel like is the tone and voice that resonated the most with this clubhouse? And do you feel like there's some tough love that might be needed moving forward to get this team and get this group back to a competitive state?
I give a lot of tough love, so that is the voice that kind of resonates. And you know, if you're curious as to whether that's true or not, go ask them. You know, I do feel like I'm positive and I'm an optimist in a lot of ways, and I feel like that has to be the foundation of the tone for that group of players. It has to be positive. It has to be optimistic. It can't be angry. I wasn't a very good player. I said that day one here. There's not one day where when a player makes a mistake, I get mad at him. It's more of an understanding tone because this thing's really hard to do. I think my guess is when players struggle, there's probably frustration with them, both with fan bases, with media, with coaches, with everybody. But we can't forget just how hard this game is, and that when their process is good and they're doing everything right, it's okay to make a mistake. Tough love, yes. I think being tough, having high standards, and loving them at the same time, there's probably no other tone, there's probably no other technique to operate in this job or any coach's role.
Hey, Tony, I want to go back to the beginning of the season when things didn't start well for the team. I've asked you a lot of questions about that, especially early on when you took over, about what went wrong and on the field.
Sure.
Were there things going on behind the scenes that were wrong, too, that we weren't privy to?
No, I wouldn't say things wrong behind the scenes. I think when you're losing games, and especially when you have massive expectations, I feel like feels like the world's falling apart around you. But no, in terms of the players, the staff, our preparation, I would hard to say that there were things that were standing out as being blatantly wrong.
Tony, I don't mean to give this the wrong tone, but are there things that you would demand or ask for in terms of say-so in personnel decisions for you to want to go forward with this job?
I think we got really good personnel here, you know, so no, I have all the faith and the trust in the leadership in the warehouse here, to put the right group together, whatever that may be. It's a really smart group. They've done it. You look back at these last 2 years, I don't think people were complaining about the group that Mike put together. I think this year there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that are well documented. As for me, I'm probably not super qualified in terms of looking at projections and I guess developing projections and putting the whole thing together, how modern front offices work. I do have a strong opinion on what a good team looks like, and Mike is really good about asking us all our opinions on that. And if asked, and yeah, I will absolutely give my opinion on what a winning team looks like and how that goes, as opposed to which players are available and who's out there and who's internal. That's bigger. That's more for a general manager and president to decide.
Hey, Tony, back here. I was just wondering, you guys experienced the largest drop in attendance in club history from this year to last. For people who didn't watch this team in kind of the back half and tuned out after the trade deadline, what would your message be to those fans? And how do you expect to kind of bring them back to Camden next year?
Yeah, I understand. We got to do better. Baltimore is a blue-collar city, and they expect a lot out of their teams, and they rightfully should. So we just need to do better as a team. We need to win more games, and we need to give them reason to want to come to the field and watch our games. Now, with that being said, I do think it's important to kind of reach out and thank the city and let them know how much we do support or we do appreciate the support that they gave us in a lot of ways. And this was a tough year, and there were big expectations. And I do still feel like there were a lot of nights where this place was full, and in spite of a losing record, and our players are thankful for that. I'm thankful for that. They made this as good as it could have been for us.
Hey, Tony, you said if Mike Elias asks you what a winning club looks like, you would tell him. Would you tell us what you think a winning club looks like?
I think he's got a lot of the pieces here right now. So I'll just say that, and I think that's fair to say. I think he's got a lot of the pieces, and I think it's probably going to look similar to the couple of teams that he built the last couple of years.
Tony, you mentioned your final conversation. Hi, sorry.
What's up?
You mentioned your final conversation with Basayo. In your final conversations with players, what was kind of your general sense of their mentality going into the offseason?
Hungry, motivated, in every which way. I don't think that out of all the guys I talked to, I don't think that there was one guy that seemed satisfied by any means. A lot of frustration, some senses of embarrassment, all the things after a season like this you would want the players to feel and portray. They were wonderful, and it was genuine. So I feel really good about these guys here, in the next couple weeks, getting themselves kind of restarted and getting themselves in a spot to help the Orioles in 2026 kind of get back to where we've been the last couple years.
Tony, as you talk about, especially the circumstances before you took over, a lot of things had to happen for the season to go the way that it did. Do you keep any space in your mind that some of it was just luck, misfortune, or having been in the trenches, do you feel like some of it was more in control of the team and the organization than maybe on the outside it looked like?
Yeah, listen, I'm an accountable guy. I constantly look at what we could have done better in the building. The luck and the misfortune, no doubt, injuries are part of this whole thing, and other teams had them as well. Maybe not to the level that we did, and maybe some more so, but I don't think about that. I think about our players and how they perform and what we can do to help those guys. So as a coach, your first thought should be, to point the finger at yourself and try to figure out what you can do and not point it to bad luck. But I also have to recognize and understand that, some of the luck with injuries this year was very unfortunate.
Tony, also, you were part of those 2023 teams, or the 2023 team where you had all those one-run wins, come from behind wins, walk-off wins. This year, obviously, as a part of the overall dip in success, you guys really struggled, especially in some of those close games. And then come August, you have some walk-offs, you have some very competitive, tight games at the finish. Was there something deficient in that area to start the season, and did guys start to develop a feel for competing late in some of those games that you won?
Sure, and I think the part of the season that you're probably referencing is that first month and a half when we stunk, in a lot of ways, and that's okay, that's real. I mean, it feels like we were losing 5 and 6 to nothing every night by the 5th and 6th inning, so it is hard to play one-run games in that scenario. And I do think as the season kind of went on, we stayed in games more, and mostly exemplified by the last couple months, and especially here at Camden with, the games that we played and how we won some of those games, but. I can't quite put my finger on it other than the fact that when Kyle Braddis showed up, when Tyler Wells showed up, and they're going into the 6th and 7th inning most of these nights, and the bullpen's getting rested, and we're able to use them in a certain way, it just felt like at that time this whole thing kind of took off. So, pitching is the name of the game in a lot of ways. Teams that suffer a lot of injuries with their pitching, it's really hard over the course of the year. To have the depth necessary to compete. I think as our depth showed up here at the end of the year with our pitching, we played those games and we won a lot of them.
Hey, Tony, I feel like throughout the course of the season, you've mentioned a number of times kind of the importance of playing small ball or getting back to the traditional aspect of baseball and not necessarily paying too much attention to underlying metrics. How would you kind of evaluate that push across the season for how it's worked?
You know what? I'll be honest with you on this one. I think our young players, we need to get better at that in a lot of ways. And to me, that's a spring training thing. I think these guys got to be pushed in spring training, turn back the clock a little bit, and have the ability to play more of a early 90s style version of the game. It's a really hard thing to do during the season, to put that type of stuff in place when you got, some players that go through a minor league system or a college career and they don't bunt a whole lot. It's hard to ask them to do off a guy throwing 100 in the 9th inning to do it for the first time. So that version of the game, that is an area where I think the staff here in place next year can make that better, and your time to do it is spring training.
You've spoken very highly of this coaching staff. I want to ask specifically about the hitting coaches, just given how much the offense and particularly the young hitters have struggled over the past year and a half. How would you kind of assess the performance of your hitting coaches?
Sure. I think the process that they have is second to none. Now, I'll say this, and I think we have to recognize this and understand the landscape of this industry. I think people tend to point fingers at the hitting coaches all the time. I want to say maybe it was last year or the year before. I think 10 hitting coaches across the league were relieved of their duties, and I'm not so sure in every one of those scenarios the grass was greener on the other side in a lot of ways. I think as a coach, when you sign up to be a coach in the big leagues, you are signing up to give all the credit and take all the blame. And that's just part of this job, and that's how it's always going to be. And that's why there tends to be way more turnover than there should be in a lot of ways. I think our guys do a wonderful job. I'm proud of them for enduring the season, just like the rest of the staff. Our other fundamental coaches, same deal. Proud of all these guys. It's been a very stressful year. I think we all understand the problem and the task at hand, and I think we all understand that it's got to get fixed. And I think those guys are certainly up to the challenge.
Tony, how much of a learning curve was there for you as an in-game manager, managing bullpen lineups and pitching changes, all that kind of stuff? And where do you feel like you were challenged the most and maybe improved the most throughout the season?
Sure. Huge learning curve, probably the same learning curve that Buck Showalter had his first year managing the big leagues, and Earl Weaver and Cal Sr. I think when you enter this job in the big leagues for the first time, there's going to be a learning curve. Now, I do feel like at probably about 10 to 15 games into this thing, my mind started catching up to the speed of the game in the dugout. And I do think that if I'm fortunate enough to do this 10 years from now, I'll probably be better at it 10 years from now than I am today. But I am very proud of how we ran the game. I think there's a lot of examples during the game of where we managed this thing really well in a lot of ways. And there's been a couple recent games here against veteran managers that have been doing it a long time that we caught mistakes on and we did very well on in our dugout. So very proud of our group on how we ran these games in a lot of ways. Do I think that I'm a finished product as an in-game manager? I think that would be crazy to think that. Do I think that a guy that's done for 10 years is a finished product? Absolutely not. I think we continue to get better.
Tony, one of the biggest names in Oriole history is back with the team, Cal Ripken Jr. Where do you see him fitting in helping a manager?
Cal's wonderful. Cal, I got to spend some time with Cal in spring training. I was walking through the equipment room one day, and he was in there, and he stopped me, and he wanted to talk about gun, and the style of shortstop that we were trying to fix at the time that he played with. And I feel like we hit it off in a lot of ways. And he has been a incredible asset to me, both pre-managing the team and also during while I've managed the team. So Cal's an incredible resource. It's a guy that is as knowledgeable as anybody, partly from his playing career and obviously, everything that came with that, but also partly from his dad. And I do feel like a lot of the lessons that he's passed on to me probably have come from his old man in a lot of ways. So Cal's a huge piece of this. If I'm here in the future, I would really love if he continued to kind of do what he's done for me over the course of this season.
Tony, it's no secret the struggles of Adley Rutschman the last season and a half. What do you make of that in terms of the performance after being a two-time All-Star,
Sure.
almost immediately, and also this year with the durability creeping in? I mean, where is Adley, and what's the key for getting him back on track to where he was?
Sure. I'm maybe a little bit of a dinosaur here, but I think catchers should be good catchers, and I think people have forgotten that about Adley, and it's frustrating for me. This guy's become one of the better defensive catchers in the game, so while everybody's kind of pointing at his offense, please, let's not forget that this is the type of catcher that you need to have behind the plate to win a World Series. So we'll start there. In terms of his offense, yeah, it's been a tough, year and a half for him in a lot of ways. I think some of it is tied to the injuries, and I think some of it he's going to kind of have to dig deep and solve some of his issues at the plate. And I do think that he's in the right mind to do it. So if you wrote out a list of players that I trust in that clubhouse and guys that I trust to look themselves in the mirror and be accountable and solve the issues that they have, Adley's at the very top for me. So I got a lot of faith in the kid. I think he's going to solve his offensive woes. I think the injuries were just part of the deal. I think it happens for some guys. Unfortunately, he had an oblique on each side. I'm sure one affected the other, would be my guess. I'm not a medical person, but use common sense here. But let's not forget how good of a catcher this guy has become. That's a very important part of his story here in 2025. Thank you, guys. Yeah, man. Thank you. See you guys down the road. Thank you, guys. Okay. Thank you. Stan Charles, by the way. Thank you, Stan. Yep. Thank you. Yep. See you. Thank you. Thank you. See you guys down the road. Danielle, good luck.
wrapping the 2025 season, first of all, I want to thank all of you and the fans and the very, very many people that care about this team and this franchise for your support this season and the ongoing support and fandom that you provide for our players. This was a difficult and trying year, and we appreciate you believing in these guys and hanging with these guys. We, as an organization, have talked a lot about our disappointments with this season, and I've talked a lot, and there's certainly a lot of meditation going on, ongoing behind the scenes, but this season is over, and our off-season is beginning, and we are pointed forward, and we're working toward next year, and that's my entire fixation right now, is improving our season next year and bouncing back to where this group of players and this organization can and should be. We have, despite the disappointments that we all experienced this year, we have a lot of talent in this building, and I mean the front office and the coaching staff and the organization, and particularly in the clubhouse, and we have the talent to right the ship and bounce back. So we're focused on that going forward. There's a lot of work ahead of us. Our goal for this offseason is to have a team when we start in Sarasota, to have a team that we all believe and that the baseball world believes and the rest of the division believes is of a quality to compete for the division title in 2026. So we're going to try to put that team together this winter, and I will be laser focused on that work.
Mike, what's the process going to be to find a new manager? Is there going to be a wide search? Is Tony Mansolino going to be involved in it?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just talk about that topic generally. First of all, the timing, understanding the timing, the manner, the context around how Tony got that assignment, and everything that he needed to do and was in front of him and worked through. We think he did a terrific job as the interim manager with that particular assignment in 2025, with where the players were, with where the organization was. I thought he added a lot of value and did a great job with that assignment. And I got a chance to work with him much more closely during this, and I'm very impressed with him as I've gotten to know him more. And I think he's a very talented guy and has a lot of skills that would add up to a great major league manager now or in the future. I've told him that we are going to utilize the opportunity of having the permanent chair vacant to talk to other people and learn and see who is available, who's interested, and figure out who the right fit is for this team for 2026. That process is going to include him, and he will be a real candidate, but I expect we are going to talk to other people, and we're initiating that process imminently.
Mike, to follow up on that, Tony described his interim experience as a 4-month interview process of its own. You obviously you just mentioned you got to work closely with him, got to see how he thinks. Do you feel that he needs to interview again formally for this position?
Well, I guess I haven't mapped out the X's and O's of what our selection process is going to look like. It's not going to be entirely my decision. The different members of the ownership group will be very involved. Other members of baseball operation, Katie Griggs, members of her side of the organization, I'm sure will be involved. So my experience with these processes, and I've been a part of 3 in my career, they're broad, they're thorough. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of different aspects to it.
Mike, let's talk about your promotion, and what do you expect to also concurrently hire a general manager, and what would be that person's duties?
Yes, so I know that came out in a bit of an unusual way. That was an arrangement that we reached this year in the spring, early in the spring. And at that point in time, with everything that we had going on, it wasn't a huge immediate priority for me to announce that, or for us to announce that. And you know, as we got into the season and things started to go the way that they went, it was nowhere near my mind at that time to address that situation. But that is the case. It does provide us the ability to utilize the general manager title in a way that many other organizations, and a growing number of other organizations, are starting to utilize it to beef up the throughput, but also the talent in the front office. And it's something that we have begun to consider and explore. But obviously it's got to be the right person, the right fit for the Orioles, for the org, for the whole situation. And it may not happen imminently, but that is a pathway that's available to us, and it's something that we may be interested in doing. It may be this offseason, it may not be.
Can you explain a little bit more about what this, if you do decide to hire another GM, what this person would be doing that's different from what you do now?
I think the answer to that very much depends on who it is. I think what's very clear to me is there's a lot of work in baseball operations now, running these departments on a day-to-day basis. It's a ton of work. We have a relatively small baseball operations department still, and we have room to grow, and we're also very interested in outside perspectives and outside talent. So that can come in different profiles and backgrounds and job duties, and it's something that I think we would tailor depending on who the person is. But there's certainly room for more high-level contributions to our department. We want people that can help us, but we also want people that can challenge us in a lot of areas, especially after you come off of a year where the organization didn't meet its goals.
Mike, did your job change at all with this title, or will it change at all if you bring in somebody in that GM role underneath of you?
Yeah, I think if we bring anyone high level in to the front office, absolutely will change the constructs of like the day-to-day way that I use my time.
Mike, a lot of the talk this year was about improving the rotation, for next year. But as the season went on, the offense continued to struggle, and some young players did not take steps forward. How much of a priority now is the offense and improving that for 20 and 26? And do you have to look outside the organization?
Yeah, when you have a season that misses the mark by this much, there's a lot on the list of what went wrong. But certainly that was amongst the most, I don't know if I want to say surprising, but kind of fundamental, that a lot of our core drafted players that have formed the spine of not only this winning team the last few years, but the rebuild leading into it. A lot of them, most of them, were hurt or had down years or stagnating in some form or fashion. And, it's definitely concerning to watch, and concerning to watch it happen to a lot of them simultaneously. I mean, that was a big factor in our record. We have talked a lot with them individually about it. They're all, I think all of us in the org, there's a lot of soul searching and looking in the mirror, and individually, what could have each of us done better to get a better result for the team? And that definitely applies to those guys. We've talked about it. We're formulating plans, and we're going to do everything that we can to kind of have them bounce back and get back on track. Very, very, very confident that that's going to happen with this group, and it's obviously a huge factor for the team next year. But the talent in those guys and the work ethic and the mindset all points to optimism.
Mike, you mentioned that your new title came together in the spring. Was that something David presented you, or was that something that you kind of advocated for for yourself, and you discussed the responsibilities with, a future potential general manager moving forward will depend on the person. I guess, are there any general characteristics or attributes of a potential GM that you're looking for?
Yeah, that's something that comes from above me, and like I said, we made the arrangement in the spring. I don't necessarily whether it's the manager position that's open or the potential GM hire. I don't necessarily want to break down an exact profile of skills or scouting report that we're going to need or going to emphasize. I think it's about a general package and talent and personality. I think when you have these really high-level jobs open in this business, there's by nature only a certain number of people every year that have kind of put themselves in position through their success or their team's success and their achievements and their resume to be considered at that time. Like, it's not a real long list any given year. And you go into the process, you assess, you try to learn these people as well as you can, and weigh and choose who's the right person for your situation, for your team at that time. And I think that applies to, at least the way I see it, these types of high-level hires.
Mike, when you took over the job, John gave you pretty free rein, and he let you do a lot of what needed to be done in a rebuilding team. Could you talk about, though, the difference now in terms of limitations you might have had financially versus now?
I'll say what I've been saying very consistently. I'm extremely impressed with this ownership group, the people that are in it, the way that it's set up, the wherewithal financially, but also business acumen that they have. And I've been a part of a lot of good ones, St. Louis, Houston. Like, I've seen a lot of high-performing, well-regarded ownership group, and this group has a chance to be very elite and impactful for Baltimore. So I'm excited about it. It's a plus, and they're going to make available everything that we need to responsibly invest in the team and the baseball operation and the stadium and the facilities. You don't want to be wasteful, and you don't do it for its own sake, but these guys are a huge positive for us, and I'm very blessed to have that behind me.
Mike, what did you learn from last offseason, the free agent acquisitions you made, and some of them did not maybe work out the way you expected, and how does that change this offseason and the aggression that you bring to the table?
I think like any off-season or season, you rarely hit on 100% of moves. I mean, it does happen. We had mixed results with acquisitions this year, and probably more mixed than we would want or to our standards, and that was definitely a factor in how the season went. You look at each individual case and the decision, how it was made, and there are often times where I got a really bad outcome, but I look back at the process and how the decision was arrived at, and if you're really being honest, which I try to be, you say, okay, I could see how it happened, and you might do that again if you went back in time and it just didn't work out well. And there's others where we've learned or taken constructive criticism on ourselves about how we arrived at that decision. And I try to continuously do that. It's something I think you come up in baseball as a talent evaluator and operator, executive. It's hard. You should be doing that. And so, we definitely think that there's things that we can draw on to improve our process. There'll be other challenges ahead as well, and we'll have to adapt to those circumstances as well. But like I said, our goal for this offseason is to have a team on February 8th or whatever the pitchers and catchers day is, where we like the way it looks, Baltimore likes the way it looks, the American League East and the baseball world is excited about that team, and it's a group of players that we say we're gonna be right in the hunt for the division title. So that's our goal going into spring training.
Mike, what options are you considering for the rest of the coaching staff under Mansolino, and is John Mabry going to be a candidate for potentially manager or something else?
I think, first of all, with John, I thought he was a great addition to our staff. I think he provided a lot of baseball insight and a presence that was very helpful in stabilizing our season. I mean, our season got better. It wasn't, what it really needed to be or should be in the second half, but I do feel like we stabilized in a good way and had some positive developments over the second half of the season, and John was a great contributor to that, and we've all really enjoyed working with him. I never use this press conference the day after the season ends, it's not even October yet, to announce any type of personnel moves, whether that's scouting, coaching, front office, anywhere in the organization. I just don't think that's fair. So we'll see how the pieces come together and what happens over the next couple of weeks. But that's all pressing business for our front office, as it always is after a season.
Mike, are you open to, or are you willing to hiring an experienced manager who would want to have some say in kind of the goings-on of this organization and how things are done? And do you think there could be a benefit to kind of a relatively young clubhouse with young hitters that have kind of declined over the past couple of years of having a more veteran manager?
Yes, I do. I think experience, when you go into any type of hiring process, experience is overwhelmingly usually a big positive. It is, in our particular situation, I think it'll definitely carry a lot of weight given all the factors that you just described. If you look at history, it is not a requisite for managerial success, and it's not necessary, and nor does it guarantee the success. So, kind of like I said earlier, it'll all be weighed in the portfolio of the candidate and their other perceived strengths and areas of lacking. We'll just look at the whole picture and the person and try to decide who's best for us right now. But experience will definitely be an attractive feature by and large.
Mike, when you have the season that you have with so many injuries and a lot of soft tissue injuries as well, I know it's a part of the game, but did it happen at a rate that makes you want to kind of look at the training regimen or you guys' rehabbing regimen and maybe alter that going forward?
Yeah, it's been a major factor, not only in this year, but in 2024. A big factor in our 2024 second half, kind of the downturn there. It's a big factor around the league. We had a lot this year and last year and more than our fair share. Of course, it always makes you look. I think a tricky part of my job, whether it's health stuff or even just baseball stuff on the field, is separating things that were misfortune versus things that we could have done something better and we could have controlled better. I think we have a lot of talent in this organization, in the medical staff and in the strength staff and that kind of whole performance area. It's an area where the sport's growing a lot and we need to grow a lot, and I do expect we'll have hiring and restructuring and evolution to try to get better, but that's not to say that that's why a bunch of injuries happen. But are we asking ourselves that question? Are we looking at it? And are there certain cases where we could have done something better? Yeah, but not like all of these cases. So we're parsing through that.
Mike, are you able to provide an update on Kerstad and what he's dealing with?
Yeah, Heston has been working with our doctors and other doctors on a medical condition. He's responded favorably to some treatment and some different treatments that they've done recently, and he's in a good spot right now and pointed in the right direction, and we're going to see him at spring training, and I'm really looking forward to that because we missed the real Heston Kerstad this year.
Sorry, is that related to the previous medical condition you had a few years ago?
I don't want to go in any more detail than that. Thanks.
Mike, you've touched on it in a couple of different avenues today. Can you share maybe the largest lesson you've learned over these last 12 months and how you plan to apply that lesson to the next 12 months?
You have to evolve. You have to adapt in this game. That's always been the case. But I think that's the most concise lesson I can draw for you.
Mike, you've mentioned building a strong team that when you get to spring training, you're happy with. I mean, what do you kind of see as the biggest roster holes right now? What do you need to add to get this team back to a competitive level?
I think that's going to be a dialogue publicly, hot stove, and as we see each other at the GM meetings and the winter meetings, we'll talk about that in all detail. I don't like to use this press conference right after the season to start breaking down the roster. I think a lot of you that follow the team closely probably have some really good ideas, and they're probably really similar to mine and the team's. But I look forward to kind of having that whole conversation and all that activity out in public the next several weeks and months.
Mike, you mentioned Katie Griggs as somebody whose input you would like in hiring a manager. What kind of input would the business operations or Katie have in terms of that process?
Oh man, I mean, you have a real integrated, in a well-functioning organization, business and baseball. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of cooperation that happens, and there's a lot of interaction with the manager's chair, and also she wants the team to win and be successful, and she's got experience in baseball and worked for Seattle, and is very bright and has a lot of good judgment on hiring. So we're tapping into that resource, but we're all part of one team, and I think one of the big things I'm most excited about with this ownership group is the growth and development and talent that we've brought in on the business side of the operation, and we're going to be seeing a lot of cool new stuff here at Camden Yards as a result of those. So we all work together very closely.
Mike, is there sort of a timetable for when you'd like to land on figuring out who the next manager is going to be? And with the GM, it sounds like that could be yes or no in terms of a timetable there. That's part of the question. The other part has to deal with the offseason. Mr. Rubenstein said he's willing to spend when you sign Basayo. Where do things stand in terms of meetings at the offseason, and what can you tell the fan base in terms of spending on free agency in the offseason?
ASAP for the manager. I got a very busy offseason ahead of me. A lot of player business as usual, but a lot of player business this offseason, and a lot of hiring. And then also, we tend to lose people to other organizations. Then so we have a lot in front of us, and getting the manager in as early as possible. I also think there's gonna be a lot of competition on the managerial market this year. So ASAP there. I think I touched on the ownership ability, willingness to spend already, but it's there, and it's just about doing so wisely and making the rubber hit the road. That's so important. And I can't recall what your third question was, if there was one.
About the GM situation, it doesn't seem as pressing as the manager.
I think it's pressing for us to get better as a front office, to bolster, to continue to evolve, learn about best practices, get talent in. It's just that position. That's not something I'm going to force on a certain timetable, and it's going to have to be right.
Mike, obviously not the results you guys wanted at the big league level. It did afford you guys the opportunity to go out and make some prospect trades at the deadline. Obviously a big draft for you guys as well. Considering some of those prospects you got back and those that have been acquired recently, where do you feel like the farm system stands going into next season?
I think we like where it is. I think it's in a better spot than it was at the beginning of the season, and a lot of that's because of the July activities, meaning the draft and the trades. I really like our upper level pitching depth right now. I think we've got a number of guys that can factor into 2026, which is exciting, and there's guys I could picture making the team out of camp. A lot of guys that I can picture being in Major League camp, but then sort of starting the year in AA or AAA, but sort of being on the radar screen for later in the season. And so that's exciting to me, and I think I believe we got a top 10 farm system right now, which is good currency for us in the off season. Not to mention what those young players might do for this organization a little deeper into the future.
Mike, with attendance down and the willingness from the ownership to spend, do you think it's important symbolically to the fan base to be an aggressive spender this offseason?
I think that this is a very disappointing season, and there's a lot of fallout from that, and it affects your attendance in this business when you don't play the way that you want to play, we're aware of that, and we're going to put together a team that we and others are excited about going into next season, and I think that things will take care of themselves if we do what we got to do on the field and win.
Mike, you've basically been talking since May about the level of self-assessment going on in your office, and I think your words were looking sort of all over the warehouse and how you do things. You bringing potentially outside voices at manager, GM, to kind of challenge you, mix stuff up. But is there anything on the public-facing end of baseball operations that you point to as an example of a way that you've changed the way you do things from the results of this season?
I think it's hard to point to a second half in 2025 as a good showcase for front office philosophies and moves. But I'm really looking forward to the winter and putting together a better team next year and having a better season. And there's a lot behind the scenes that's going into that and that we're doing to make ourselves better.
Mike, I wanted to drill down on the general manager's situation. Wouldn't it seem that would be important to get the general manager in place and have his input on who the manager would be?
Yeah, I think if we're going to add and acquire one this winter, that would definitely be the preference to do it in that order. But that may not take place this winter. I think it's mostly about the availability that we have to utilize that title to access and acquire top front office talent around the league going forward, and people that can bolster and supplement us but also challenge us. But the manager search has its own timetable, and that's a decision whether it's going to be Tony or somebody else that we want to make ASAP.
Mike, your young core hitters that have declined or underperformed over the past 2 seasons have, since they entered the organization, kind of had the same hitting philosophies taught to them and a lot of the same hitting coaches. Do you think that there need to be changes either in the messengers or the messaging to your young hitters, considering their decline over the past 2 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. It has brought a lot of success, but like I said, you've got to adapt and evolve and adjust in this business. The competition's always changing. The landscape's always changing. That applies to players. That applies to front offices. That applies to player development people, coaches. And so we're certainly weighing that and addressing it. And are we going to do things exactly the same next year? Absolutely not.
Mike, you've said twice today that the goal for next year is to be in the mix for the AL East title. Is it reasonable then to assume that it's the goal for this organization to win a World Series next season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the goal for every organization. I think there's a group of players that we have that we feel like we're platforming us to do that, and we have the chance to do that in 2026. I speak that way because first things first is the regular season. You've got a 162-game regular season, and winning the division is a huge accomplishment, and then the playoffs kind of come after that. But you try to build a team that's going to win the AL East. That's a pretty good team for World Series aspirations too.
Like you talked before the season about the depth that you had at starting pitcher, and then all the injuries kind of happened at once, and you went into the season with several of those guys missing. What did you learn from that scenario and being able to rely on pitchers' health versus their track records, and how does that maybe shape your approach to this winter?
Yeah, I mean, that is the nature of pitching nowadays. So I don't know if I learned that, but it's definitely a reminder. And that's why you need all that depth. I do think what we experienced at the beginning part of the year, that would have been hard to plan for. I mean, it would have taken a lot of overkill to plan for losing all that depth. But we do need to put together a better just overall pitching staff going into next season to guard against stuff like that, but also to raise the ceiling of the team too.
One positive from the pitching group, Trevor Rogers, obviously kind of a breakout season. How confident are you in his ability to replicate this year? And with him as kind of a frontline starter, do you imagine him as your number 2 next year? And you don't want to get too into player personnel decisions, but just how confident are you in Trevor entering next year?
First of all, really proud and admire what he did to build himself back up. I think he did a lot of work, but our strength and pitching people and medical people too. He was hurt at the beginning of the year. Did a lot to put him in that position, and it's been in a rough year one of the better success stories around the organization. One of the bright things as we look ahead to 2026 to have him kind of on the trajectory that he's at right now. I think it's hard for anyone to repeat an ERA in the ones, especially in this day and age. So I'm not saying that we're expecting or needing that, but I do think he has cemented himself as a front of the rotation type of starter going into next year. Whether that's the 1, 2, or the 3 starter is going to depend on what we do and who we get. But pretty safe to say he's going to be, one of our top of the fold guys in the rotation, and we're very, very excited about that.
Mike, after his comeback to the rotation this year, can you get a full season innings-wise out of Kyle Bradish in 2026? And a follow-up to that would be, you talked about Trevor and Bradish, that's a top 1, 2. Do you need a strong number 3 to go with them?
I would like a strong front half of the rotation guy to go with us if we can, and we'll be on the hunt for pitching improvements in that area and others. I think Bradish's innings is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on, but I do think there's a way and a possibility to keep him up and running full season in a responsible way next year. And the platform that he's provided in terms of how many innings he's thrown and how those innings went this year were about as good as you would have hoped for coming off of the injury. So we feel like he's in a great spot.
When a season doesn't go the way that is planned, obviously there are questions about what's going on in the clubhouse and leadership and all of those things. Do you feel like, especially after the trade deadline, that the young core of hitters are capable or willing or able to step up into those leadership roles?
Well, they're doing it. I'm watching them do it, and I'm talking to them about it, and I'm seeing the growth, and I'm hearing the growth. And something like this, I think, accelerates that out of necessity. And had a lot of conversations the last couple of months, but also the last couple of days with our guys. And we're all ashamed of this and motivated by it and frustrated by what happened. And that includes them too. I think, leadership is something in all levels of an organization that has a huge impact, and that we will try to feel good about as we put the team together in terms of staffing, but also the player roster.
With Felix Bautista undergoing surgery that's expected to sideline him into next season, having already undergone Tommy John before, just how big of a blow is that for the bullpen, not just next year, but moving forward, and how you have to kind of address it?
Yeah, it's been a huge blow since he went down at the end of 2023. That was one of the elite players in the game. The way he was pitching, about as good as it gets as a closer in 2023, and we've missed him ever since. And to have him come back and look pretty good after the surgery, and then have this happen, it's been rough. So he's got another long road ahead of him. Hopeful that he can be back toward the end of 2026. but there's a lot of time and work that'll have to go into it between now and then, but he's done it before.
Tony said a few times just how important Tyler O'Neill could be next year and just how much of a boost he could be if he's able to stay healthy and be a centerpiece of the lineup. Just how high is your level of confidence still that he can be that and can be a core piece of this team moving forward?
From what I see as an evaluator, the talent is there. I mean, the power, the swing, the way he moves in the outfield, that player is in there. He wasn't able to express the type of production that he's done in his best years this year because he wasn't available that much, and that's been a part of his history, and we know that. And I think he's a tremendous roster fit for our group when he's up and running and going good, and he's a guy that can carry a lineup when he's doing that. I mean, it's really high impact, middle of the order threat when he's on a roll. Just talked to him extensively. He's frustrated too. And now that we've had him for a year, we're talking with him and trying to plan out ways to do as best as we can to keep him in tip-top form for as much as possible next year, because I do think he can really raise the ceiling of this team, and I'm optimistic about it.
Mike, you got a big hole at the end of the games now. With the injury history that Tyler Wells has had, do you still see him as a starter who could get up to 140, 150 innings, or do you think he might be more valuable in a late inning role?
This has always been a conversation with Tyler for years because he's good at both, which is impressive. Not a lot of people can do that. And he also just hasn't happened to have the innings load, get through a whole 170, 180 season healthy as a starter. He hasn't proven he can do it at the major league level. Whether that's something he can control or not, I don't really know, but it just hasn't happened yet. So it's always a little bit tempting to have the reliever conversation with him. But if you got a guy that can start and be good as a starter, that's really valuable, and you always try to stick with that. And so, that's the plan with Tyler. I thought he looked really good. It was great to have him back, and he's a big part of our team kind of spiritually too. And that was wonderful getting him back. Whatever he's doing next year, he's going to be a big part of the pitching staff, but we're planning on him as a rotation option over the course of this winter.
Mike, after you guys extended Samuel Basayo, there was a lot of discourse and some reports about what this could mean for the future of Adley Rutschman in this organization. Are you, as the front office, committed to Adley remaining what he's been so far, which is a cornerstone of this team? And given that, just how disappointing has his past year and a half been, and are you still confident that he can get back to the player that he was just a few years ago?
Yes, Adley's the guy. He will be our frontline catcher. Frustrating season for him, coming off of a frustrating second half, and he's aware of it. We're all aware of it. We're all working on it. There were some injuries sprinkled in this year that I think were a factor in him kind of getting out of sync again. We saw flashes of him offensively, the way that he can and should be. I thought he had a great defensive season, and he does a great job leading our pitching staff. So he's a key guy for this whole thing. There's no way around that, and we're gonna work with him to restore his presence in baseball as an all-star. But he's going to be front and center as our starting catcher, and there's plenty of. I hope we were encouraged with the way Sammy caught in the majors too, and there's definitely room to have two really good catchers at the major league level. That's a good problem to have, and as I've talked about, also Sammy and Adley can DH, and Sammy can play first base. So there's a lot of playing time to go around between those two guys, and I'm glad that we have both of them together.
Mike, after kind of injuries were the name of the game the last 2 seasons, how are you going into this offseason to kind of prevent that from happening again, also taking into account the added strength in the farm system?
Yeah, we're going to do the best that we can to bring these players into spring training in one piece, and keep them on track throughout the season. We have a lot of discussions about that, and we'll continue to bring in as much expertise as we feel that we need to control weak control in that area and get good outcomes. And yeah, I think our farm system is an asset for the future, but I think we're going to be in a position to have trade conversations and be competitive because we do have a good farm system right now.
Mike, we asked Tony about small ball strategies and base running, things like that, and he those sort of one of his most critical areas of the team where he suggested that the team might need, I think what he described as a 90s style spring training, sort of harder fundamentals focused. It felt like maybe he was talking about more than just the topic at hand on that. I mean, obviously Tony's manager, I'm sure he'll institute the spring training he wants, but is the spring training practice sort of under consideration and what you guys do there no matter who the new manager is?
Yeah, look, this is a highly competitive league and game and division. The team that finished last in our division last year just won it. And it just shows how small the margins are. And you've got to stay on top of everything and be as good as you can be in all these different facets. And there's just a lot that goes into it. And there's constantly areas where you feel a little bit behind, you want to get a little bit better, and then over here something else develops, and there's just so many fine points to the game that you've really got to stay on top of. It's not up to me to get down there and dictate our fundamentals. That's not my expertise, but we've got to put together staffs and communication systems and people that have the right philosophies in all those areas and stay on top of it. So that's something that the person in the manager's chair, people in the front office, people in our ownership group, just everyone available who are experts in this area, we're going to put a lot of time into getting organized and getting a little bit better next year.